Hello everyone, welcome to a game between Magnus Carlsen and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov played at the Norway Chess in 2022 on 6th of June. So let's get straight into the game. We have Magnus opening with knight to f3 and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov responds with d5. We have bishop, we have g3 and now g6, bishop to g2 and bishop to g7. So both players already fianchettoing their bishop, and Magnus going again for this Catalan type of opening. So we have knight to f6 and now castles by both players. And Magnus, of course, recently had insane amounts of success with the Catalan, and also in the World Championship he was playing it successfully. So we have now c4 and simply letting the pawn stand there because he plays knight to c3 and basically says to black, hey, if you want to take my pawn, go ahead, I don't care about that. So Shakhriyar actually decides to grab the pawn on c4, and white now takes the full center, e4, beautiful central control, so you get some compensation for the pawn you lost. But of course black is no slouch. They are playing bishop to g4, pinning your knight, and Magnus immediately hunts it away, and then we have a trade of knight versus bishop. So now we have a strike in the center with e5, basically giving away a pawn, but now of course you will simply win it back by playing knight back to d7, attacking the pawn, and Magnus decides to give it back on his own terms by playing the move e6, so he will not simply let Shakhriyar Mamedyarov capture the pawn as he wants, but he will force him to recapture with his own pawn, now splitting the structure. So he has created a weakness in the center of the board for, or not the center of the board, but on e6 for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. And now we have bishop to e3, finishing development, and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov brings over his queen to e7, also centralizing the queen and preparing to connect the rooks. So now we have bishop back to g2, that's where the bishop usually belongs in the Catalan, and is also opening up some space for the queen and is stepping out of potential annoying moves with the rook, because of course you don't want your queen to be ever tied to defending the bishop. So now we have knight to a6, mobilizing the knight, and Magnus plays queen e2, pressuring the pawn here and asking Mamedyarov if he wants to defend it, but he says no, he's gonna jump in with the knight, creating some complications on the queen side for Magnus, or at least trying to do that. So we have captures. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov gave the pawn back for free, but now he plays knight to c2, attacking the rook in the corner and also stepping inside of the queen if this knight were to move away. So Magnus plays knight to d5, attacking black's queen and also attacking the knight. So we have captures and captures, and now again pushing the pawns forward, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov to the d4 square, forcing Magnus to retreat with his bishop to d2. But let's see if this pawn will become more of a liability or actually more of weakness, because now Magnus plays, Shakhriyar first brings over his rook, and now Magnus plays queen to b3. Now again moving in with the knight to c5, again attacking the queen, forcing Magnus to play queen to a3, and now unpinning the queen by playing queen to d7. So we have a centralization of the rook, rook a to c1, and now b6, protecting the knight furthermore, because of course it was attacked twice and only defended once. So we have now e5 by Magnus, sacrificing another pawn. It is free to capture, and Mamedyarov goes for it. So now we have kind of an initiative starting for Magnus. It's rook to e1, attacking the bishop, so bishop moves back, and now we have b4, chasing away this knight, which is controlling quite important b3 square, because Magnus wants to put his queen there after trading some rooks, and the pressure on this pawn is just too much. Mamedyarov moves now with the knight to c3, and Magnus grabs his pawn back on e6. So he is of course threatening a discovery attack, so Mamedyarov steps out of it with king to h8, and Magnus also hides his king on h2. So now we have a trade of rooks, and really what's happening here, so we have completely material equality, except Magnus has the bishop pair, and also Magnus has the better pawn structure, because this pawn is seemingly quite weak, and of course Magnus' pawn are very nice, protecting here the king, but also protecting themselves, whereas this pawn here will probably end up becoming a weakness, but of course until now it is very strongly defended by the bishop on g7. So we have queen to c4, improving the position of the queen, and now h6 by black, probably preparing to bring the king at some point, and also making just some space. Also maybe ideas of pushing here or here, of course not, because he could have done that in one move, but the g5 push could come at some point, depending on how the game goes. So we have a3 by Magnus, solidifying the pawn structure on the queen side, and now a5 by Mamedyarov, immediately attacking the pawn on b4 after it was protected. So we have captures, and now bishop to f1, bringing back the bishop. So we have now queen over to f8 and king over to g2. Of course, defending the pawn, which was getting attacked by the queen, and Mamedyarov plays knight to e4, adding further pressure onto this pawn. So really, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov is now the guy who is kind of pressuring Magnus, but Magnus, cool as always, defends with bishop to e1. Don't hesitate to make some retreating moves. Sometimes it is just necessary. So we have now queen captures on a3. So Magnus sacrificed another pawn, this time on the a file. But let's see if it will end up being only a temporary sacrifice, or if we will be unable to recapture. So we have now bishop to d3, attacking the knight on d4, and now the knight has to move out of the way, attacking the queen, of course. So we have queen to a6, again putting pressure on this knight. Of course, it's still defended at the moment, but still we have knight to f5 now, and Magnus immediately makes use of that move by playing h4. Of course, he wants to play h5, attacking the pawn, which will cause immense trouble for black, since this knight is protected by this pawn. So he basically forces black to play h5 himself, and now black really has quite a lot of weak pawns, which are not easy to push and not easy to protect. So we have now bishop captures a5, finally getting this pawn back, and now king to h7. Now queen to b5, unpinning himself, and black plays queen to f8. Now queen to d5, really centralizing that queen, making sure that he uses his most powerful piece in the endgame. And now we have queen to d6, offering a queen trade. Magnus says, no, I'm going to go to f3. I want to keep the queens on the board, of course. And now Shakhriyar plays queen to e5, attacking the bishop over here. And yeah, Magnus simply plays bishop to d8, preparing to relocate the bishop probably on the g5 square. So we have now queen to e6 and queen to b7 by Magnus. Now knight to d6, attacking the queen, and Magnus plays queen to c6, pinning the knight to the queen, of course. So Mamedyarov at this point is very low on time. He has just a bit over 2 minutes, whereas Magnus still has more than 10 minutes. So in his time pressure, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov plays the move queen to b3, of course, stopping he stops to defend this knight, but at the same time attacks Magnus's bishop. So of course, if Magnus were to take, Shakhriyar would take back, and the position would be very much in the balance. But there is one move, so try to find it yourself, which white can play to win the game. And of course, Magnus found the move. After a minute, he played it. And we have bishop captures g6 with check. Of course, if you're going to lose your bishop anyway, you might want to give it up for a pawn. And of course, after black captures, you will recapture. The knight with a check. So there is really not a lot black can do at this point. It's simply lost because not only black is down a pawn, that might be something you could still try to draw, but also black's king is simply incredibly weak, whereas white's king, of course, is still very well protected by his own pawns. So we have now queen up to d7 and now king to g6, stepping out of the pin, and now we have queen to c6 check. Now the king runs over to f7 and we have queen to c5, putting some pressure on this pawn right here. And now Mamedyarov plays queen to b7 check. But Magnus simply plays f3, blocking the check. And now after king to e8, Magnus drops the bishop back to c7, and now we have a check again, but it doesn't really do anything. Magnus simply hides the king on h3, and after the move d3, Magnus picks up another pawn with check, and we have king to d7, and Magnus gives a final check on f7, and yeah, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov plays the move king to c6, and in this position with 31 seconds on the clock left, he resigns the game because there's really nothing he can do. The position is +8 for Magnus, and he has still 3 minutes on the clock, so there's no way he's gonna lose this position. So really an incredibly beautiful game by Magnus. Again, he really sacrificed a lot of pawns. First here the pawn on c4, and then again he pushed his pawn forward, let his opponent split his own pawn structure to create a weakness. He will then later, after he sacrificed another pawn here on e5, he lets it capture, and then he basically picks up the weakness he created much earlier in the game. So really beautiful game by Magnus again and again. He wins with the Catalan, and he had so much success with this opening lately, and yeah, really amazing. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the game. So I want to thank you a lot for watching. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. And as always, thanks for watching.